SDL is worth nearly $200 million more now than it was a couple of days ago.
On the TMS side, they said it seemed like there were very few people who could actually deliver everything that they were potentially looking for.
Welcome to another episode of SlatorPod. This is episode 34. SlatorPod, the language industry podcast for all things translation, localization, who funds all these businesses. And it's brought to you again from Europe's capital, Zurich, and the world's capital, London. Hello, Esther.
Hi, Florian.
Yeah, I think, it's bold to call Zurich the capital of Europe, but it's not as bold to call London the capital of the world.
It's pretty bold. I suppose it depends
bold?
Whose map you're looking at, doesn't it, really?
Depends, yeah. Should be okay. Anyway, we are the 166th most popular podcast in business in Latvia.
Wow.
We're climbing up the ranks.
Quite the accolade.
There's so many random stats out there. I don't even know where to look. But no, I mean, we're hitting a lot of downloads now and some good, also the YouTube thing is going well. It's a little harder to produce for YouTube than just do the podcast because you got to do the visuals too. And I'm really proud that our sales and marketing report is flying off the shelves. So if you haven't got your copy, head over to Slator.com and get it. Otherwise you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage to all of your rivals who got the report. 36 pages on sales and marketing, and I'm really proud, about the release and also that it's apparently very popular with our readers and clients. So it seems like...
Well, we're also going to be doing a webinar, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to do a webinar on September 1st. We had to change the date once. So it's going to be September 1st. So it's just going to be about, I think, half an hour. We're going to go through the report and then have an open Q&A. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Should be good.
Today, we are going to talk about SDL, which published results this week. Then we're going to talk about Systran, who has a set of new owners. Then Infobip, a Croatian enterprise company, like communication as a product, I think. There was some acronym there. Media localization, Amazon, and then what's going on in Australia, where translation's hitting national news. You're gonna walk us through this. So, but first, let's talk about SDL. SDL is worth nearly $200 million more now than it was a couple of days ago.
Oh wow!
Yeah, think about that. So, again, we spoke about it many times. They're listed in the stock market, and their shares are up 35% over the past 2 days since they announced results. And we spoke to the CEO. We got a chance to speak to the CEO, Adolfo Hernandez, and the CFO, Sina Walters, on Tuesday. Very interesting. Had a good talk with them. Got a lot of additional color to the results. So, I mean, think about this: $200 million. That's quite the pop in the shares. And they're now not nearly not exactly at an all-time high, but getting there. So it's quite interesting that during these crazy times, this company, at least in the stock market, is performing so well. So basically, why are the shares up by so much? So first, we asked the CFO, or I asked Adolfo and Sina, and she answered that all of the brokers are saying that they were left behind in the sector rally. And the sector rally, what does that mean? Well, there's a handful of listed LSPs, and most of them have done better in the past before this week than SDL. So a lot of the people that are following the stock, there's like a handful of analysts that are covering the SDL stock. They were saying, that they were left in the sector rally. And with the results, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, with that set of results, they felt that there's some catch up to do. But I mean, catch up and up 35%, $200 million, to me, it's a bit of a difference. I mean, a bit of catch up.
She said it was like resetting, didn't she? Basically, sort of where they should have been potentially before. like resetting the shares to where, because they were left behind previously.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still, it strikes me as a bit of unusual that on this set of results, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, weren't like crazy good, the shares would pop that much. So expectations must have been quite low. And it's interesting. So, and they're saying, when we're talking about the sector rally, RWS actually outperformed SDL over the past, whatever, X number of years, but also this year. And they're now worth still 4 times what SDL is worth. They're just almost 4 times. I mean, they're at a $2 billion pound valuation, $2.5 billion US in the US. And RWS also just hit an all-time high this week. SDL, as I said, is not at an all-time high, but kind of close. So long story short here, the stock market likes translation companies, likes localization companies, because those two companies are pretty at the very, very heart of this industry, right? I mean, they're doing straight up, IP translation, patent translation. SDL has, one of the most successful CAT tools. They bought Donnelly. So this is not like some type of AI play like Appen or some adjacent crazy business that there's a lot of fancy in. This is core translation localization, and those companies have done really well. So let's talk about the results. So revenues were stable. Actually, they were down a little bit for SDL. So again, that shows you kind of how maybe low expectations were. So they were down to 180 million pounds. It's literally 1% down from the same period. I mean, I'm talking about 6 months, down 1%. To 180 million pounds versus the same period in 2019. So I'm saying lower expectations. Obviously, we're going through a once in a lifetime pandemic, right? So actually, it's kind of holding her own and having stable revenues is impressive. In terms of I think profits. Let me just pull this up here. I need to pull up the profits. And then we can also look at the individual units. There's 3 units. We got, what do we have here? We have language services, language technologies, and content technologies. And we're going to talk about them in a second. But in terms of the profit, it's actually slightly up. So it's from $10.9 million pounds to $11.7 million pounds. So that's 7% up. So they did, so there's some, we spoke about some cost savings a couple of months back. So it looks like they're saving some costs. They're gaining some efficiencies. So on flat revenues, profits before tax are actually up. So investors really like that. And then language services was down a little bit to like $125 million pounds. Then language technologies, that's the Trados and language cloud and these types of core localization technologies were literally the same. It's like 25.6 last year to 25.7 this year. I mean, talk about stability. And then content technology, which is Tridion and some other technologies that I frankly don't 100% understand, and we're also stable, just up slightly in terms of profits, the same. So let's talk about a couple of key highlights. So what I'm always, every time I'm covering these results, I'm impressed or surprised that SDL says they have these like 1,200 translators, internal translators, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, now they say they hired more. They hired how many percent?
8% extra.
Yeah, they got 8%. They hired more internal translators, and they're hiring more internal translators because they are feeling that, or they say it's more efficient for them. It's more, the margins are higher on internal translators, so it's cheaper, right? They're more competitive. This is very, very different from most other LSPs. I mean, typically, when you have a crisis and you have internal translators, the first thing you do is look at your internal translator roster and maybe let a few people go. At least that's my experience, and then shift more to freelancers, pressure them on price, yada yada. It's the kind of the downward spiral there. But SDL, maybe because they have so many, they have a system where they can get actually quite a lot of efficiencies from their internal pool. So that's interesting. They hired more internal translators. They also fixed some internal stuff, like they had so many disparate systems, and now they brought everything on a system called Helix. And in terms of sales, we also spoke to Adolfo, the CEO, about how do you do sales in an environment like this? It's very difficult. You can't visit clients, you can't do lead gen. So he says, look, lead gen, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he's saying lead gen is less of a priority because we're already working with like 90 out of the 100 top buyers anyway in some kind of relationship. So we're basically focusing more on the cross-selling, the upselling, instead of doing the hardcore lead gen. And the hardcore lead gen, that's the tough part if you're doing remote, right? I mean, there's very tough to establish a relationship with somebody, purely virtual. It's a little bit easier to maintain relationships. On the tech side, I think the biggest change, and on the product side, is that they're launching SDL Trader Studio 2021. And they're moving to subscription payments. So, typically it's this perpetual license, you buy it and then that's that, right? And now they're going to subscription payments. So you can, like all these other SaaS tools that one uses, you can pay it on a monthly or maybe an annual basis. He didn't want to tell me anything about the pricing of it, because this is it's a very, very big decision for them. I mean, you're setting the pricing on a product that's very key to one of your business units. Well, what if you get it wrong, right? What if it's too cheap? What if it's too expensive? I mean, too cheap, you're taking down your margins and your revenue is too expensive and you're going to lose customers. So they said they did a lot of research. They talked to a bunch of clients, and it'll be interesting to see what the pricing is on that. Look, overall, I think a lot of people, like a lot of these analysts and myself included, were impressed by just how stable that business is. And I think on the investor side, I think a lot of people would be hoping that they're going to get a big boost once COVID is over, right? So if they can perform this well during a kind of a once-in-a-lifetime disruptive environment like now, what can they do when this is all over? So, interesting results. It's quite a long article. We have a lot of information there. And of course, for the very adventurous of you, you can also read the original filing, which is like 35 pages of, financial glory. So head over there and dig into that. Over to France and Korea with Systran, pure play machine translation. What happened there this week?
Yeah, so this week, Systran announced that they had got a new majority owner. So this is now the 51% owner of Systran STIC or STIC Investments. Not sure what they prefer to go by.
I guess STIC, right? STIC.
Rather than STIC. I know, I prefer to read out these acronyms, but yeah, sure, STIC. Based in South Korea. So obviously Systran being machine translation provider, France-based, as you said, and it was founded back in the 1960s. So long established machine translation provider, one of the sort of very well-known players out there on the market. So the transaction took place, I think, in July, but apparently no cash changed hands. And this is kind of where the slightly more complicated bit comes into play, but the reason being that STIC took over from a company called CSLI, which STIC was also invested in. Which used to own Systran. So kind of one sort of long chain of ownership. Now, STIC is the majority owner. They own 51%. But Systran also has a consortium of additional South Korean investors on board who own collectively 42%. So those include SoftBank Korea, Korea Investment Partners, and Korea Investment Securities. Then the remaining, I think there's something like 7% of shares left, which are owned by, I wouldn't even know how to pronounce this company, but LLSOLLU.
That's a catchy name. They should get the domain for that.
I don't think it's supposed to be catchy, but anyway, it's basically CSLI, so the previous majority owners reincarnated under a new name. So there we go. Some very complex sort of, transactions, I suppose, things changing hands, but obviously the headline being that the majority owner is STIC Investments.
Yeah, maybe that Lizolu company is like some type of new holding company, just created for the purpose of. Anyway, how big is Systran? I think this is the first time we got their figures, right?
Yeah, this was the interesting sort of point of reference. So Jean Senela, the CEO, told us that the 2019 revenues for Systran were $15 million. So, and that was up around 18% from 2018. Yeah.
I think I wonder how, I don't recall SDL's pure play MT business. I just recall that they said that it's up 42% in the first half. Okay. So it grew quite a lot for SDL. I don't actually recall the absolute size, but I think
isn't it within that language technologies business?
Yeah, no, that's why they don't break it out.
So we know it's less than 25.
Oh yeah, it's a lot less. So it's probably, I don't know, 5, 10, but it's growing quickly. Apparently. So what are their plans? What are they going to do now? So it looks like they, sorted out on the investor side. Is there any plan to invest additional, do additional investments, do some cool stuff going forward?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're talking about doing, sort of coming up with a cloud-based MT solution, which is currently under development as well, specifically to cater to smaller businesses. So interestingly, Jean told us that I think prior to 2019, most of their business had been sort of like 90% on-premise or privately hosted solutions. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, traditionally, the big users of MT or this type of MT have been very focused on the security conscious or high security requirements. So it will be across sectors like defense, like finance, maybe even governmental and things like that. So they had focused very traditionally on those kind of high security requirement based sectors, but they are now looking to release a cloud-based solution, which would cater far more to the needs of smaller companies.
Yeah, I mean, when I spoke to Jean also, I feel that maybe the on-prem is coming back a little bit. What I mean by that is, now 3 years ago it was probably all about cloud, but now cloud is so popular and there's so much competition. I mean, there you are actually competing with Google and obviously DeepL and some of these other guys. On the on-premise, you're not. On the on-premise, I mean, DeepL is not going to install a server at a bank, but Systran is, right? And so that market is a lot more like that. Machine translation, like a managed service, like we spoke about this before. So I actually think this is quite an attractive market going forward as well, having these things on site. A lot of people are security conscious. So yes, they go into they are expanding into the cloud probably because they just have to, but I think they also.
Well, he was also foreseeing a lot of growth, I think, still within on-premise. He said it had been something like 30% growth over the last few years. So it's definitely still an attractive segment of the market to be in.
Yeah, but exactly. But there you need like salespeople, you need like infrastructure, you need an office in the country. Otherwise, you're not going to get that type of business. And I think they spoke about doing being in Japan, expanding into Korea. Maybe not something you're going to do right now during COVID, opening physical new offices, but definitely once this is over, that's
so
where they would be going.
Opened two, I think. They already opened two, one in Japan and one in Tokyo. One in Tokyo and one, I think, in South Korea last year in 2019.
Yeah.
But they were kind of looking at some other locations as well, based around either Southeast Asia or I think they said South America as a new possible location. Very much looking into that. And I think Jean was talking about Southeast Asia in particular as being, a really high density area when it comes to languages. So just there being a lot of different languages operating in that area of the world.
There are many. Okay, so moving on to Croatia. There was a very interesting company called Infobip. Didn't know them before we featured them, but must be one of the most successful Croatian companies like ever. If I think of Croatia, I don't have any other reference. I think of beautiful beaches and unbeatable national team football. So, but this is a giant company, $700 million in revenue, very interesting. Vertical. So we talked to the person in charge for localization there. So
yeah,
tell us a bit more about that.
We did an interview with Samir Mihadik, who is the product manager at Infobip. So not only is he, I guess, only dedicated to localization, he also has a wider remit there. He was telling us about Infobip and their translations and localization process. So they have a portal which is currently offered in 19 different locales. And I think they've recently kind of pivoted and got, by the sounds of it, a lot more organized on the localization side. So they originally had translations being done by either local sales staff or local tech staff, but obviously that approach didn't necessarily scale after a few years. So they've recently brought on board an external LSP and a TMS provider. And they particularly were focusing on the idea of continuous localization that would then support their agile product development. So they've gone through the process of hiring an LSP and hiring a TMS provider as well. And they were telling us that they work with a smaller global LSP and one tech provider. So they're looking to keep their localization team internally quite small by the sounds of it, and then just kind of expand as and when needed. And then when they're sort of talking about, they're based within engineering actually at the moment. So they have obviously Mihadic wearing the hat of localization manager while also doing the product management piece as well.
They didn't want to tell us who the LSP and the TMS is, right?
I don't think so. No, I mean, they did give us some sort of interesting observations around having been out to market and some of the things that they kind of encountered when talking to suppliers. So they were talking about pricing models, for example. I think they very much wanted to steer clear of things like minimum fees for projects.
Yeah. They have so many small ones, right?
Yeah, but I think obviously that's really commonplace traditionally within the market. But then, if you're just feeding sort of bits and bobs or strings here and there, you don't want to be hit with a minimum project fee every single time, which makes a lot of sense. So obviously they went out, they negotiated, they found some kind of solution. And then the agile piece, I think, was really important to them. So they were talking about setting up this continuous localization workflow, but then for that the LSP had to be able to work within that model, so that was important for them as well. And then on the TMS side, they said it seemed like there were very few people who could actually deliver everything that they were potentially looking for. So they wanted, on the one hand, a really powerful API so they could obviously pull their content, but then they also needed a really good portal for as and when they would be uploading the ad hoc kind of translation pieces as well. Okay. Yeah. Interesting sort of survey of the market, I suppose.
I can't speculate. Should I speculate?
You can or you can't.
I can. XTRF liked our tweet.
Aha.
Is
that speculation or is that just a fact?
Well, it's a fact, but do with it whatever you want.
Got it. Okay.
For what it's worth. They liked the tweet. No other TMS liked the tweet.
Duly noted.
Duly noted. No, it's very, very interesting. And again, and they are very quick. I mean, we've done so many of these buyer features, and I got to say, this was probably one of the fastest turnaround in terms of, taking the time to answer the questions, getting it signed off by internal comms, because most of these companies, when they do give kind of operational details, they have it signed off by internal comms. So so that was
they're
very,
lean
very
and
efficient.
agile. There we go. Just like
they are lean and agile. I really appreciate this. Thanks, Samir. If you're listening to this, thank you very much. Moving on to Amazon. Couple of iterations larger. Now, if you want to translate like Amazon, you can do this using Sockeye. Did you know what Sockeye is before? Did you know what
the product?
No, Sockeye is a salmon.
A salmon?
Salmon, yeah, a type of salmon.
Salmon. A fish.
Salmon. The fish, yeah.
Salmon, yeah, salmon.
Silent
L, yeah.
What's that?
I said it's a silent L.
Is it?
Yeah. At least in my dialect.
I don't know. I don't have a dialect, so I'm unsure. Salmon.
Okay, it's a type of salmon. Got it.
Anyway, it's Sockeye. So that's why we put a fish in the image for the article. Okay, so this is Amazon Translate. It's Sockeye is a open source toolkit for normal machine translation. So one of the 5, 6, 7 that are out there, and it's Amazon's and it's open source. You can download it on GitHub, and they started this in 2017. We covered it at the time. Then it was kind of quiet. I don't think it got as much traction as some of the other frameworks, like for example, OpenNMT, Systran's framework, OpenNMT. I actually the name of the Google one escapes me, but so this one is maybe like 3rd or 4th in terms of adoption, and but
is it Marion or something, isn't it?
Yeah, Marion, yeah,
Marianne,
Marianne, and OpenNMT, and there's another one. Anyway, so
Fairtech.
That is even another one. That's more Facebook, I think.
That's Facebook, yeah.
Okay, but like there's all these layers. Like some of them are frameworks, and then some of them are like, I mean, Transform is kind of the overarching underlying. I mean, anyway, so somebody listening from the tech side is going to cry right now when I'm butchering this. So, well, available on GitHub. It's the version 2. It's the first major relaunch or iteration since July 2017. You can read up on all the technical details in the article, and then there's a giant paper that we link to. So, broadly, it just shows that Amazon continues to push in MT quite a lot, that they keep developing. And so, for a while I thought they were slowing down, but they're really not slowing down. So definitely with Google and some of the other big tech companies, something to watch out for. In a much less tech, much more human story, there is a major translation-related the public outcry in Australia. And we did speak about Australia last time, but things have escalated since because of all these additional lockdowns. What's this all about?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a debacle going on. It stems from some mistranslations and issues that have been observed within some of the translations, particularly relating to coronavirus public messaging. And this is both at the federal level and also at the state level. So I think the state of Victoria is kind of the area of focus at the moment because it's where a lot of the new cases of coronavirus have been concentrated recently. So they've noticed, or people have spotted problems with multiple languages in the public health messaging. For example, Hindi and Arabic and Chinese and Farsi have all had sort of like different issues spotted. I think the best or possibly the worst anecdote I've seen about some of the mistranslations or the issues is a poster about wearing face masks that apparently contained both Farsi and Arabic. So the same language, one poster was supposed to be in one language, but it contained both languages. And apparently the two languages might appear sort of similar to a non-specialist. So that's not ideal.
That seems like a DTP issue, right?
Well, that's the thing. I think once you read up on some of these things, it's not just mistranslations that we're talking about. It is things like formatting. It's maybe some kind of upload issue when it comes to,
The usual PM, it's just, obviously, we're used to that, but in this context, no mistakes, please.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I think obviously the concern is that people are not getting the right information out there and not having the right access to, potential sort of health and guidance around coronavirus as well. But the good news, if you want to look for some within this, is that apparently the state of Victoria have said that they're adding funding about 2 million Aussie dollars for translation and interpreting and 5.5 million Aussie dollars for expanding the distribution of translations.
Okay. That's good news. And not so good news is that in Switzerland we have an app, a COVID app. We just spoke before. I don't think you have something nationwide, but in Switzerland they have a COVID app. They launched it. And when I opened it a couple of days ago, it said like, and I'm going to have to, translate from German, but it said, hey, note that on iOS 13.6, there is a weekly notification by Apple that, quote unquote, your your phone has identified 0 possible encounters or contacts, right? That created a bunch of confusion. I'm translating from German, but and then the notification or the thing, it says this is a translation error by Apple. Basically, it would mean in German that there have been 0 positive contacts that you encountered. Just again, sorry, my free translation here is horrible, but basically, long story short, like a translation, an Apple translation created a bunch of confusion, and in Switzerland, because there's already have about 1.5 million people that have the app installed. And so, obviously, whenever you get a notification from your COVID app, you open the COVID app.
You want to take notice.
You want to take notice. So,
understand what they're telling you.
Yeah, and it already did the rounds on LinkedIn. There's a few Swiss LSPs that posted like, hey, no, language is important, etc. All right. That's it for today. We're reaching the half hour. Not that this is a hard stop, but, this room is getting... quite hot.
It's pretty hot and stuffy, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm going to have to open the door now. All right. Well, stay safe, everyone. Thanks for listening as always, and catch you again next week. Thanks so much, Esther.
Thanks. Cheers.
Right,
bye.